back to the Fantasy Rugby Draft podcast. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson, and joining me again in the booth is the man primarily made of moss, Nathan Mossman. How are you, sir?
I've got a question. It's probably not, maybe for you, maybe more so for the South African listeners. I'm just wondering why they don't play Friday night games in South Africa.
I've wondered that as well. They used to. I know last season we have had a couple. Like I remember when I was in the UK, there was like the odd 5 o'clock game. But have we had one this season?
No.
No, I was surprised as well. I don't know why they don't do that.
It's quite strange. So they tend to back them up, and I mean, like, look at this weekend for an example, play 3 back to back, which is quite a big effort for the TV viewing audience to take all that in. The New Zealand and I guess Australian side too it's fairly standardised. It's always one Friday night game, one Saturday night game, and I guess they look at the draw, and generally, with 5 teams, there'll be 2 home and maybe 2 New Zealand teams playing each other. Occasionally, you'll get that Saturday afternoon game, but that's it basically.
And I tell you what, we missed our podcast on Thursday, but that was one of the questions that we were going to ask at the top. One of our listeners, I think it might have been Ed Pye, asked us how to get away with, or what Jedi mind tricks do you have to use to be able to allow your partner to watch rugby for the week?
Yeah, it's a tough one. 3 games back to back.
Yeah, that's the point, right? If you're in South Africa, and you're trying to watch those, you're going to have to pick one and choose, or pick a couple.
Yeah, you're going to struggle, I think.
But within New Zealand and Australia, as you say, you've got your Friday and Saturday night, and it's fairly routinely.
Which is kind of a roundabout way of me making my excuse for why I haven't seen any of the South African games. I think I want people to think that I just can't be bothered watching the South African rugby games. Obviously, I'm invested in as many of those players as I am anyone else. But it's just a case sometimes you're trying to watch three back-to-back on replay, and it's a tough ask on a Sunday morning.
Yeah, it is. And after this podcast, you might be invested in the South African teams a little bit more when you look at their run-in that we've already discussed, but we'll get into a bit more in depth. We're recording this on Sunday. We're going to do this again. It's a bit fresher in the minds and a bit easier schedule-wise for Mossman and myself, and then we'll stitch together the top scores, managers and leagues on Monday once the league table's updated. We'll review Gameweek 13, then we will cross across to the free agent desk, but we'll kind of make it a little bit of a hybrid this week. I think we'll talk about some players that potentially are available on your waiver wire, but we'll also talk about players you probably should target in the run-in, and also for the playoffs. And then, as I say, we'll touch on the top scores, managers and leagues. I guess first an apology though for not getting the pod to you at the end of last week. Sometimes we just can't get it off the ground. But in case those are keeping track at home, our recommendations were Lambie, Combrink, Jordan, Tusi, Pisi, and Lions front row.
Genius.
Not bad. How did those guys go? Right, let's get into the review for the Game Week 13. We put our poll out. Bulls Stormers, Red Sunwolves, Force Blues. What do you think?
Force Blues was pretty dire.
It was. I actually voted for Force Blues as well, because I watched the Bulls Stormers match, and it was exactly as it was going to be. A really tight, intense battle. With not a hell of a lot of scoring and not a hell of a lot of fantasy points, but that's actually what got the winning vote. So 54% voted for Bulls Stormers to be last on Match of the Day. Sunwolves Reds was 15%, and Force Blues was 31%. Which again I think is a little unfair, but I think it was mainly based around looking at fantasy points and output from those guys in that game. Okay, let's go into Crusaders Waratahs. Pretty horrendous conditions. I think it probably capped the total amount of fantasy rugby points in this, but the Crusaders didn't seem to mind, did they?
Well, that's kind of one of the points, I think, is that we talk quite often about conditions and the effect it has. Good teams still play well. And they don't use the conditions as an excuse. And the Crusaders this week, and I think the Lions last week, and you contrast that with Blues Force, who are 2 poor teams playing in poor conditions, and they'll use that as an excuse. It really isn't. If you've got good teams will still score points.
It was quite funny. They came out of the blocks pretty quickly, the Crusaders, and they were tossing it around in their own, or 22 effectively. And I don't think the Waratahs were quite set up defensively for that. They were like, what are these guys doing? We're set back. We had all of the return kickers and people ready to take all the bombs, and Todd and Tafu are short balling outside the midfield. I guess from fantasy, going looking a little bit forward, I think a few folks might have been a little bit worried whether when Nadolo came back, whether it was going to be McAuley or McNichol. Were you worried at all? Or at least actually that shouldn't be the question. Who do you think it is going to be when Nadolo comes back?
I think it'll be McAuley.
Do you?
Yes.
Interesting.
You mean that'll be left out?
Oh, sorry, pardon me. Okay, Karen. Yep, park the car in the same garage then.
Yeah, McAuley will be left out. I think that was the case leading up to this, and I don't think there's, other than that hat-trick game, which, hey, was fantastic, I think McNichol's proven himself to be, I think, a better overall player, and probably a better foil for having Nadolo on the other wing. Yeah,
100% agree. He's a good player, Johnny McNichol. Richie Mo'unga keeps on putting up points, but I bring him up only because I want to ask you, as a person who is heavily invested in Richie Mo'unga's success, having owned him in all 5 of my leagues, what do you make of his run-in? And actually, more importantly, what do you make of the grand final appearance against the Hurricanes at AMI?
It doesn't bother me at AMI. Oh,
yeah,
yes.
In Christchurch.
Sorry. Yeah, okay. Doesn't bother me at all. I think we've talked about Richie Mo'unga in the past and described him as matchup proof, and I think that's a pretty fair assessment. I think I know a team that, in one of my leagues, who's basically stacked completely with Crusaders players almost, and that is not a bad place to be, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think you can go wrong.
Yep. No, you might be right. I'm always a little bit worried when you have so much invested in like 5 leagues of the same player, but no, look, it's a bit crystal bally. What about Zach Guilford, who came on? I only bring him up again because Reece Robinson can't be any worse, right?
No. So I saw somebody on Twitter, Arwell Jones, who had pointed out that this was just a continuation of the theory of players playing against their old team, which I thought was a great call. Yeah, he did. He looked kind of fired up, and I'm assuming that was just natural and not substance related in any way. But yeah, had something to prove. Things kind of fell to him a little bit. I think he was motivated, but at the same time, don't go nuts on Zach Guilford.
No, it was only to say if you've got Reece Robinson in your team, I'll prefer to have Zach Guilford at the moment.
Sure.
Holloway got injured. Have you heard anything from that this morning?
No, I did. No, they did say where the injury was. Was it a hand or a?
Yeah, I didn't see it. Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Not sure if it was a recurrence. Well, they just talked about it briefly in commentary, but sort of bypassed me. Yeah.
Yeah, Justin Marshall's commentary.
I can bypass that by just turning the sound off, which is the way to go.
A bit tough game to have a go at Andrew Callaway here, isn't it? It was conditions, as you say, poor. The Crusaders had them under the pump. The Waratahs did actually come back, to be fair, and had a bit of a sniff at it in the second half. But I guess people are going to point at Israel Folau's performance as proof of why he should be playing centre, but I'm still not convinced it's still the best thing for the Waratahs.
It probably isn't, but I think what this kind of proved is that it doesn't matter too much from a fantasy point of view. Yes, myself and perhaps you, we still think it is not ideal, but the guy's just so good. I don't think it matters.
No,
you could stick him at number 8, and I'm sure he'd still score points.
Yeah, that's right. No, absolutely.
I mean, to be making outside breaks at a fairly packed defensive line in those conditions, I thought, it was pretty good. Admittedly, up against the Fonz, but sure.
I'm glad you brought him up, actually. I thought that was a classic bit of team selection from Todd Blackadder. I mean, all week people have been talking about how Matt Faddis had showed him up. He was never going to be dropped. He was never going to say the coach was, reading the press. It was always going to be, no. It was something else. Something else. A very, very kind of Arsene Wenger-y type response. Very bullheaded from Black Todd Adder. Anything more from this match, mate?
No, there really isn't, I don't think.
Red Sunwolves. Karevi came in at the last minute, so folks that had taken a little bit of gamble and started him got handsomely rewarded, but I guess a bit of a buzzkill for Campbell Magnay owners. What did you make of Chris F. Satir's performance?
Just incredibly frustrating, really. I think you summed it up a couple of weeks ago when you said he didn't look interested, and this was a game where he didn't look interested. He should have been all over this, and I actually tipped him in the lead up to it, and he's one of these people I just don't think, you just can't put your faith in him.
Yeah, and it's a bit of a weird one because he made 2 really lung-busting, like try-saving tackles, some really great defensive performances, and he looked really good in that aspect of the game. But he just, I think, it's almost like when you play the Sunwolves, you expect things to flow your way, and you don't have to work as hard, and you don't have to work on being as creative or coming off your wing or anything like that. And he just sat out there and waited. I wonder if I was trying to kind of theorise what may have caused such a downtick in performance, because he had actually been playing well over the last few weeks. And I wondered if it was Karevi. I wonder if Karevi coming in meant that, Karevi, how many metres? He's still running, isn't he? He's got like 300 metres or something. It was just ridiculous.
I think it was 100. It was 130 or something.
Yeah, it was 130. Yeah. But just bonkers.
Yeah.
And I wondered if that had a little bit of something to do with it, but I would have thought that'd be an uptick because you've got Karevi inside you.
Mm. Yeah, and just on the Karevi thing, I did speak to someone who said, obviously, hindsight's 20/20, but did say that this was the last chance that he would have had to prove his fitness before the Wallaby squad's named, because they've got the bye next week. So apparently it was a given that he was always going to play, which I thought,
disagree.
Yeah, I thought it was an interesting comment, and obviously I didn't start him because I just didn't take that chance. And yeah, sure, you can be disappointed that you've got 30-odd points sitting on your bench, but hey, it's what it is.
I disagree with that totally. I think, well, not totally, I just disagree with it. I just think that Michael Checker had already picked up the phone. He knows what he's got in Samu Karevi. If anything, I might have thought he might say, you probably don't need him against the Sunwolves, just rest him because we definitely are going to need you against England.
They might have cottonwooled him.
Yeah,
you think? Yeah.
That's right. I mean, who's going to play 12 there? It's probably going to be a Lealiafano, but if you've got Kurandrani playing 13, who isn't in a great amount of form, who are you going to put at 12, or whoever backup there? I mean, Karevi needs to be in that squad.
Yeah, it's a fair point.
If he's not starting. I think you and I have discussed this plenty. I want to make a new submission for my no-fly list. I wonder if you'll humour me and put Etienne Nabuli on that list.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I was never a big fan.
No.
If anything, he was better than Saltier in this game, but not by much.
There was one moment where Karevi in their own 22, Karevi just started to make a bit of a breakout, and Nabuli, and it was a 2-on-1, and Nabuli made it a 1-on-1 because he just gave up. He just didn't get on the outside. It didn't break out from a fast walk. He just gave up, and Karevi just looked to the outside and had to go over the guy instead, which he did. But it just looked. That was the moment I just thought, wow. And it was early on as well. It wasn't like it was quite late on in the piece where he's completely gassed. He looked less than Chris Satir in terms of aspiration at that point. So yeah, I'm going to put him on the list. And the rule is if he doesn't come off the list until he scores 10 points. Well, my rule is, we can probably discuss this at length at some other point. Curtis Browning, what do you make of that? Just the matchup? He's been playing okay as an 8, finding his feet there, but long term.
Yeah. No, I actually stuck him into one particular lineup when I was scratching around, and I'm not patting myself on the back for that because I do think it's a fluke.
No, you can do all right when you put the Sunwolves, I guess. Frisbee, very, very good. Carpenter, again.
Yeah.
Very good. Must be getting into that top 10 midfielder discussion, right?
Oh, he's getting right up there, yeah. And it's quite often it's straight from set piece. It's the skip play from Pisi straight to Carpenter, and Carpenter running an angle of some description to take the ball, flat. That's one of their go-to moves. So he's getting it a lot, and I think Pisi looks for him.
He goes to the same school as Ma Nonu in terms of beauty therapy, right? He's got the eyeliner. Yeah,
there is a kind of Jack Sparrow kind of.
Yeah, that's right. It is. Jack Sparrow's a really good description.
Yeah.
What about? Okay, so let's kind of dig into that a little bit. Who would you have, Moala or Carpenter for the rest of the season? Now, let me just run you through the Blues fixtures: Crusaders, Hurricanes, Brumbies, Waratahs, and the Sunwolves have got the Brumbies, Waratahs, Bulls, Sharks. So they're both actually pretty tough.
I can't help but feel that Moala will possibly come on strong towards the last part of the season. And as I just said, if this is a kind of MO for the Sunwolves to find Carpenter in these positions. You'd think other teams might start to crack onto that after a while. It's hard to go past the points that Carpenter has scored, but at the same time, the Blues would be crazy to not feed Moala, because that backline looks awful, and he's the only guy in it that seems to be capable of doing anything.
It does, yeah. And we'll get on to him. He did look good. I'm going to try and get something for Carpenter now. I think that is a pretty horror run of fixtures for them. Brumbies, Waratahs, Bulls, Sharks. You're not going to get a bit of chance to kind of swap them out. And I might even look at players like a Jordan, and Esterhuizen, way down that, not big point scorers in terms of up to this point, but just looking at the matchups for the Sharks. Tusi Pisi is a monster. He's one of those fly halves, right? That's just a little bit selfish, and that's great for us.
Totally. Yeah. No, he's probably nailed on every week starter, I think, just about, for most teams. There's not too many. I mean, and I guess it's a lot of people actually will have that dilemma, because he would have been so far down the pecking order, you would have picked him up off the waiver wire, and maybe now you're wondering whether to play Beauden Barrett or Tusi Pisi, and there might be circumstances where that's a genuine question.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Beauden Barrett, because looking at those fixtures for the Sunwolves, Brumbies, Waratahs, Bulls, Sharks, that's tough. I think if you can get something for Tusi Pisi now, do. I mean, obviously try big. No one's going to give up Lambie, Sapawanga, Moanga, and probably Crude and Foley. But some might be interested with Beauden Barrett and Yankees.
Yeah, maybe.
I'd obviously prefer Barrett and Yankees over Tusi Pisi with that run-in.
Jean-Luc Duplessis?
Yeah, something like that. Yep, might look at that as well. Yep. It's that time of the season, though, isn't it, where players FRD managers are trying to make that last playoff. We've got one game week left, and you're trying to get that last win to get you into the playoffs. And we have the Sharks and the Reds on a bye. So in all unlikelihood, you're probably not going to get Karibi or probably Frisbee. But if you can, try to prey on someone in your league that does own those guys and needs to get into the playoffs, and you offer them something for this week. There's a chance you might be able to do a deal. Now you're probably not going to get a cheap deal, but you might be able to get 95 cents on the dollar.
And try for someone like Liam Gill, I think, as well.
Oh yeah, that's cool.
You're obviously a big fan, and he's a really good player, and just seems to be improving week on week as well. And with anybody that's involved as much as he is, that obviously equals fantasy points.
Yeah. So this is probably the last time we're going to mention Goromaru on this podcast. He's out for the season, and the June tests apparently. Should have been yellow carded though, right, for that?
Possibly twice.
Yeah, that's right. I know.
If he didn't hurt himself, he would have been yellow carded, I think.
Yeah, that's true. There's a bit of a sympathy vote there. Apparently there's a few mitigating circumstances around Goromaru and why he may not be playing as well. There's a few distractions, apparently. But as I say, that's probably the last we're going to hear of him. It was fun while it lasted. What was it, 12 points, 15 points, something like that?
Yeah.
Anything more from this match, mate?
No, I don't think so.
Cool. Your beloved Rebels against the Dirty Chiefs. What did you make of this? We'd heard a lot about rain coming into it, and it obviously did play a little bit of a factor in terms of capping, the total amount of fantasy points, but Chiefs played well. Yeah,
Chiefs played well. Did enough. They weren't outstanding, but I just sort of felt like this was the kind of performance that they just needed. It was solid, steady, clinical. I think that probably sums it up.
Cruden loves these types of matches. When it's wet and the big guys can't step and they can't move as quickly, he's just ducking and diving in there. He loves this type of thing.
Yeah, no, he's definitely in his element, and and he's in good form.
He is. Rumours midweek that Harris was going to go at 10 and take the kicking, and Hodge going at 15. It didn't actually pan out, but clearly where there's smoke, there's fire. So Harris was given the goal kicking duties, and he did look very good. And I mean, I was a bit of a knock on him last week, but as long as his drum is beating and he's taking kicks, he's going to be a good performer.
Well, he only actually kicked 2 goals, so that's not where his points came from.
No, it wasn't. No.
Came up with a try and an assist, and obviously meters as well. So it's just purely as a fullback, but listed as a midfielder, that's could be where his main value comes from. And Rebels aren't generally high scorers, and I don't know what their fixtures are looking like.
Well, they've got the Crusaders in one of them. I know that for a fact.
Sure. Okay. So, but yeah, I mean, midfielder's been bare all season. So if you've got Mike Harris, I think it's a no-brainer that you're starting him.
Yeah, and just keep an eye out for that, whether he does actually drift into 10. If he did drift to 10, what would you think? There'd be an uptick, downtick, because he was still playing a lot at first receiver from phase play.
It's a downtick, I think.
Placid on the bench suggests maybe something to that.
Sure. It's not a huge downtick, but it is a downtick.
What do you do with players like Sefa Naivalu in this type of matchup, where you know that it's going to be a really tough matchup for him? He's unlikely to get a hell of a lot of ball. It would have been cats and dogs in Hamilton, rough surface, against a really motivated Chiefs team. Well, what do you do? Because everything's screaming to sit him, right? But you can't. I mean, everyone was asking us on social about what to do with Sefa, and I think he's one of those players, certainly in my mind, I don't know if you're the same, where you just plug in and you just have to persevere with a low score. Pretty
much, because he's capable of that 90-metre breakout that I think he came up with 2 weeks ago. Because he's got that capability, I think you stick him in there because chances are whoever you're replacing him with, and it might be, say, somebody like a Mitch Inman, because there isn't that many midfielders around, you're probably better off just rolling the dice with Naivalu. I mean, if you're deep at midfielder, obviously, you might think about it. If you've got, say you've got Moala and Naivalu, you might say that on a bad matchup, I'll take Moala because I just think that his floor is a little bit higher. He's going to get more work. But in a matchup, say like next week, which we Rebels have the Force, that seems to me like a Naivalu game.
Yeah, I agree. I find that really difficult, especially in rugby. It seems that you can get a lot of these very isolating games in a wet conditions against a very good team like this. But yeah, tough one. Now, what about Tony Pulu? He looked pretty good. Didn't have to do a hell of a lot, but did what he did well.
I guess that's the nature of being on the end of a pretty handy backline, is you are going to get opportunities, and he's a clinical type player.
We love a cement on Leonard Brown, don't we?
Yeah, he does look really good. He's sort of gone to the next level, and once again it clouds the issue now, because I'm assuming that we'll have Chaz back, possibly as early as next week. And where do you go to then? You've actually got 3 really good midfielders who are all in decent form.
Well, no, absolutely. Good problem to have, I guess, for Dave Rennie, but yeah, it looked really, really impressive. Tamanavalu looks good as well. A little note on injury. I think Michael Leach is out for the rest of the tournament. I saw a note about that on Twitter as well. So just check that. I don't know how many folks were starting with him. There was a few, but just to point to note. Talani Sau is a decent player if you need to fill in there. Like for like. Anything more from this match? Hodge just keeps running hard and straight and picking up points. I guess you got to persevere. Yep.
Scored in this game. That's good.
Yeah.
I thought Sean McMahon was a standout for them.
He's crazy. He's everything the Rebels are. He's just he's just got an engine.
He's an absolute lead from the front kind of player, isn't he?
Oh, he's immense. I would, if I was the Wallaby team, I'd try and make room for him somewhere. All right, Force Blues then.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know what to make of this. This is pretty ugly.
They just...
Look, the rain was really bad, and at one point in the second half it was actually comical. You could see LB Matthewson at one point, they put a close-up on him, and he was actually laughing.
Yeah, that's right.
So wet.
I did see that, and the commentators made some remark about, it must feel like he's back in Auckland. I don't know how much time he's spent in Auckland, but it doesn't get like that very often.
No, that was torrential. That was cats and dogs. Can you guess who the one player was that was in the first 3 pages for either team? And it's not who you're thinking.
So it's not the Blues front row then.
Touche.
I'll take a wild guess then and say... who would I actually guess if I had to guess? Is it Matt Hodgson?
No, it was Kino.
Okay.
Yeah. Hey, look, Petey was the next one on that list. I figured you'd have a pot at him. But that probably tells you about the level of this match. One question I did have, though... Well, actually, I had a few questions, because there was a couple of interesting notes here from Fantasy. So, Benny Taps. Kicking goals.
Yeah.
What's that about?
Don't know. Yeah. Who knew?
That's right.
that he did. Yeah, nailed a couple. Looked okay. Like I said, I did watch this, but I wasn't sure if I know Luke Burton had come onto the field.
Yep.
So it might be that perhaps he subbed on for Pryor. I don't know. He did. Okay. So that was the circumstance then.
But I thought Burton would have taken the kick. Burton was doing it last year, right?
Burton is a goal kicker. Yep. That's right. So...
Perhaps if you grow your hair a little bit longer than it should be, you can't be kicking goals.
Well,
Some sort of rule I've got in Western Australia.
It'll get in your eyes or something, yeah.
Exactly. Need an Alice band or something in there. But just looking at the Force, you mentioned they play the Rebels next. They play the Cheetahs after that. They got the Stormers and Brumbies at the last two matchups, so they're pretty ugly. But as a 2-week proposition, you mentioned how thin midfielder is. He's got to have a little bit of value. I guess it dovetails into who do you think is going to start, Pryor or Burton? If you had to guess.
I'd say Pryor will keep starting.
You'd still reckon?
Well, I mean, it was a substitution. Those happen. So why would I feel that this had changed? Did I think that Burton came on and was lights out? No.
No. I just wonder if Pryor has always been a bit of a makeshift, and I know Peter Grant came in to win championships, but it doesn't seem to be working out too well for him.
He might be winning championships out on the golf course or something, because I don't know where he is, but he's not in here. He's, where's John O'Lance? Because it's quite interesting.
He can't be far, right?
Yeah, he can't be far away. And it's quite strange because he writes, I think, a column, on one of the either rugby websites or perhaps it's for, one of the Western Australian newspapers or something. And it's quite odd because you have this column written by this guy who hasn't played for pretty much the entire season. You think, how much does he really know about what's going on?
Yeah, that's right. Tough matchups for the Rebels, for the Force though in the last two with Brumbies and Stormers. So yeah, I'm not sure either actually have value, but it'd be interesting in the next two matches though, Rebels and Cheetahs. If you were actually struggling at midfielder to try and get over that line just for the next two matches, I might take a little bit of a roll of dice just to own Benny Tapua'i.
Sure. But I mean, when you say that they're tough matchups for the Force, I mean, any matchup is pretty tough for the Force. And I'm not joking. I mean, we kind of looked at this and we thought, the Blues coming off a 40-point loss, this could be a good thing for the Force. But when we forgot that this is the Force.
If you ever wanted to watch, sorry, go on.
Well, let's just remember who the Force are, Yeah,
exactly. If you ever wanted to watch two matches that don't want to win two teams that don't want to win a rugby game, then watch this one on repeat.
Oh yeah.
Milani Nano let a few folks down, but again a little bit of rain involved in that. But I thought Moala did. We talked about him before. He looked okay. He looked like probably the fulcrum of that kind of Blues team to go forward. Looked good. Anything more from this match, mate? I don't want to dwell on it too much.
God. No. Next.
Right. Lions Jags. So looking at the Lions next fixtures in the playoffs. They play the Sharks at home, and then they play the Kings at home. That could be our first 100-point performance. And then Jaguares away. So just keep that in mind when we go through this bit of analysis. But the Hawaris played okay for the first kind of half hour or so. They were in this match. And then the floodgates just opened. I've got a question for you there. How many languages do you think Ruan Combrink can speak?
Is this something you actually know, or is this some sort of...
No, I do need the answer for it, because I'm trying to find if there's something that he can't do.
Yeah, I thought you were heading in that direction. Yeah.
Do you remember 2 weeks ago when I asked you whether he was left or right-footed?
I know where you're going with this.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I couldn't tell. I've been keeping an eye on him for the last 2 weeks, and he still kicks the ball as well off his left as he does off the right. And then the last conversion he took, he missed it, but he took it with his left. It was brilliant.
Yeah. No, this is a talented dude.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think he was trolling either. He genuinely kicked. I think Stuart Berry asked him, you kick with your left now. If he was walking back, you could hear it picked up in the mic.
Is that something? It's like a bowler has to say whether he's left arm, right arm, coming around the wicket or that kind of thing. So, yeah.
So he was kicking because Yankees came off. It looked like a bit of a hand injury. He had it fairly heavy taped. I was just trying to scratch around to see if I could see any notes before the podcast, but I couldn't see anything.
No, I mean, to me this looked precautionary. He had his arm strapped, which I think is from a previous industry. Well, it could have been, but his
works the mines on his week.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's out there in the fields and then obviously working in the mines and so that was one arm, and then the other arm, the other hand is the one they were strapping. It almost looked like they were on the sideline trying to strap it. And the physio just went, look, this is getting too difficult, let's just sub you off. So it was the physio basically just going, no, I can't be bothered with this anymore. Can't figure out the strapping. So, no, I'm not particularly worried about that.
I'm not worried about it either, I'm not. Trade for Combrink, though. Obviously, looking at those fixtures, how many other players would you prefer to own? I mean, he is a little bit inconsistent, but he does punish bad teams. Against the Blues, I was expecting him to go a little bit bad, and that's kind of stuck in my mind. But he scores these 40-point performances, and he wins your game weeks. And if you've got the Kings and the Jags in the playoffs, how many other players would you prefer? I think you'd want Folau, you'd want
Nadolo.
McKenzie, Nadolo. You'd take Nadolo? Definitely?
Yeah, I'd still take Nadolo. Yeah.
Okay, you take Nadolo. What about Severe, James Lowe, Osborne, or Dag?
Well, I think Severe almost doesn't belong in this conversation.
No, it doesn't, unfortunately. But a lot of folks do think so, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. So if you can trade on that, I mean, hands down, Combrink is a better fantasy option right now.
Absolutely. What about James Lowe? Because I brought him up. I actually didn't have him in this list to start with when I was starting this conversation, but just looking at the statistics, I would take him, especially with the running too.
For sure, yeah. I mean, and I say that as a James Lowe fan, but no,
I loved him.
Combrink for sure, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, okay, let's take a step down then, because I think there is a step down to Mapo. It's not a big step down, and Mapo actually could actually be a little bit more consistent, but just doesn't have the massive upside of Combrink. Where would you fit amongst him against those other guys now? Yeah, well,
gee, I mean, so let's talk about Mapo v Lowe, for instance. I guess considering the playoffs.
Highlanders in the final. Chiefs Highlanders at Forsyth Bar in the final.
Sure, yeah, and that's what based on those fixtures, it's got to be Mapo.
Yeah, up against Naholo.
Yeah.
Versus playing the Jags away in the Ibiza nightclub. What about players like Skosan? Because he's been sneakily good the last he's crescendoed, if you will.
Yeah.
So he's steadily gone up from kind of the 10, 11, now he's into the mid-teens, and this was a big match for him.
Yep. Yeah, another good option, and you get into that, like you're saying, that point of the season where it's really, the fixtures are probably one of the key things. In some ways, they're more important than the player.
Yeah.
In the sense that I would take, say, a step down to Skosan from I'm just trying to think. So who would I like? I don't know. I'm just thinking if Nana is actually a big step down. Well, definitely like I say, a Haylett Petty, right? Who's probably a bigger name, definitely a higher drafted player. But I don't think there's a question that you'd take Skosan over Haylett Petty. Yeah,
and so I do have a bit of a list, and I was going to bring it on with the Sharks guys, but players like Nabuli, Chris F. Satir, Dane Haylett Petty, Villuin, Nanai, Tushilette, you'd have Skosan over all those guys?
Yeah, yep.
What about players like Yamada? We talked about the Sunwolves matchup, top try scorer.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. It's getting closer. I mean,
it's crazy we're talking about this, isn't it? Because we just haven't really highlighted Skosan much, but he's been a quiet performer.
No, absolutely. But I guess the thing is that when we discussed Yamada a week or two ago, we were saying that he's legit, and I think you've got to stick with that. I think.
Yeah, he's going to play for Japan in the June tests as well. He's going to come back with kilometres. Don't know. May pick up an injury. Don't know. Skosan won't be. What about Jet Li? Skosan.
Oh, Skosan. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No, it's interesting. I like it. I was a bit surprised to see Manisi playing after his turnstile tackling of late, but I guess this is a bit more symptom of the opposition. I think they actually want him to be the 12, don't they? Do you see that? Do you think that is the case, or do you think they want Yancey to be there?
Well, like, Yancey hasn't nailed that position down.
No.
And it's weird though, because it's not like he's done anything wrong.
No, and I guess that's what I'm trying to get at here. He hasn't done a hell of a lot wrong, but they're still putting Manisi in, who has done stuff wrong.
So they're obviously,
I think they lean towards that Mapo Manisi midfield.
They must, believe in him, yeah.
And he looked really good. Look, he didn't miss any of his tackles. He made 8, didn't miss any this week. So he's obviously someone's had a bit of a word in his ear. Now, admittedly, well, I say admittedly, but the Jags did throw a bit of them at a certain point. What about the Lions front row? Now, we talked about, we'll go back to the matchups again. If you had the Hurricanes front row, would you trade for the Lions front row?
Yes.
So would I. I would. It's madness, right?
Yeah. Considering...
And there could have been more. Aka van der Veer was just about over in the corner as well. He just got bundled out.
Yeah. Yeah. And as you've pointed out in the past, it's when you're investing in the Lions front row, you're not investing just in one player.
That's right.
And so you're spreading your risk in a way that you're not doing with Dane Coles.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, you look at Dylan Smith and Redlinghouse, Marks, and then we talk about Aka, the Warthog as well. They just keep chopping and changing those rounds. So even if there is a little bit of a threat to potentially resting against the Kings and Jags, that front row is still going to go gangbusters. I actually haven't got a hell of a lot to talk about in terms of the Jags. They were fairly disappointing all around. I thought Issa played okay and tried pretty hard, but it's good to see Sanchez, I guess, scoring well again, coming back to what we kind of normally know. But what do you make of these guys going forward? They've got some tough matchups.
They do, yeah. I mean, I haven't been a believer in pretty much all of them all season, and there's nothing that's going to make me change my mind now. I think there's probably not that many Jags that are actually getting started, I think, at this stage of the season. There are a lot of them that will be on the outer now. Mm-hmm. There'll be a few guys that you've got in your squad that you're pretty much benching most weeks now.
A lot of folks are starting Buffali, weren't they? Mainly because he was a winger, a midfielder who's playing on the wing, but just didn't go his way again this time. I think it shows you what the Jaguars front row is without Creevy as well, right? I mean, sorry, Sunnyville Creevy.
Yeah. And now that, say, people like Tom English, for instance, are back, I think, that would probably marginalise Buffali a little bit more, because I definitely prefer somebody like English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a bit of a point to note that it was good to see English come through. Wasn't exactly going to be for this match, but he'll be better for those 80 minutes.
That's right, yeah.
Okay, anything more from this match, mate?
Just wanted to... I was reading on the Super Rugby website, they were talking about the Combrink taking over the goal kicks and saying how Yankees' goal-kicking woes continued, which I just thought was just kind of a bizarre thing to say. And
Really?
It was a kind of a way to segue just into there was an article talking about kicking percentages in one of the New Zealand newspapers. So it was focused mainly on the New Zealand kickers, but just from that when they sort of moved away to talk about the foreign or the other teams outside of New Zealand. So Tusi Pisi is the most accurate, a regular kicker in the competition with a 77% strike rate. 33 out of 43. Liliafano, 76. Sanchez, 74. Yankees, 72. So the best in the New Zealand conference is Sapawanga with 75, so it's 39 from 52 attempts. And then Mackenzie, 70. This is leading into this week, by the way. 70, West, 69. Mwanga, 67. Barrett, 62. And Cruden on 50, but Cruden with obviously a very small sample size because this was prior to him taking over some of the kicking. So you can kind of dismiss.
You think that's going to go down?
Interesting that Barrett still has the most successful kicks, 41 from 66. His percentage is lower, but he's actually kicked more, just for whatever reason. That's they're either just getting more shots at goal, which is actually fairly. It's actually how he's done it in the past seasons as well. Yeah. He just ended up taking more kicks at goal. But Yankees Yankees on 72%, so only Sapawanga higher than him from the New Zealand point of view, and and he's fifth overall. So
Yeah, interesting. That sounds like someone's written a headline before they actually wrote the article.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and even if they did want to knee jerk to this match, and we're just focusing 2 out of 5. Yeah, that's not ideal, but Jesus, I wouldn't say it's a continuation of the woefulness.
No, it was a strange thing to say, because I think we've commented on his golfing at the past and actually thought looked pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Looked like he sort of had his technique together, knew what he was doing, and to be fair, it wasn't like Combrink came on and did a lot better. So if you read that article and you suddenly got worried, don't worry.
You'd obviously listen to the podcast. Just keep your head down, keep your foot a bit closer, your planting foot closer to the ball.
All of that good advice. Yeah.
Sharks Kings. Let's look at. I don't want to harp on too much around studs are studs, right? I want to talk about the fringe players. Lambie's the number 1 fly half from here and going forward, and Willie LaRue might be a top 5. I don't think there's much in doubt there. Looking at the Sharks fixtures in the playoffs, so we talked about them playing the Lions. Then they play the Cheetahs and they play the Sunwolves at home in the grand final. That's pretty tasty. So I wanted to talk about players like Paul Jordan and Esterhuizen. Firstly, I guess which 2 of those would you prefer?
Which 2 of those 2 players?
Which of those 2? Yeah, well, Esterhuizen. They read out his stats, right? Do you hear how heavy he was and tall he was?
No.
Esterhuizen. He's like a $110 and about 1.90 m or something.
Wow. Yeah, he's a big dude.
Yeah, it's massive.
So I'm just looking at the stats now.
So this match was a classic Jordan match where he got on the end of a few. He got on the end of a few breaks, which is what, and he's got top end and he can finish, and he did. Esterhuizen, his finish was a great bit of play by Willie LaRue. I say great, they're playing Kings. A good bit of play from Willie LaRue and a hard running Esterhuizen who ran over about 4 blokes to get there. And that was what he does versus Jordan. So they're very different types of players. Looking at the Cheetahs and then at the Sunwolves at home, I'd want a lot of these guys. I'd want to get a lot of Jordan and Esterhuizen somewhere near my teams.
Okay.
Which of those 2 would you prefer going forward?
Well, it's a tough one. I mean, just like I said, looking at the stats, I mean, it blew me away actually when I looked at it just now. So they are the 6th and 7th best scoring midfielders in the competition. And Jordan is actually ahead just by 2 points. But looking at the way they've scored their points, Jordan is way more inconsistent. And obviously the 42 he scored here is a massive chunk of the points he's actually scored overall. I mean, so it's a quick count. I agree. I think you're leaning towards what I was going to say, which is Andre Esterhuizen. That's who I would prefer. If you really want to roll the dice, I think those 2 matches, certainly that final could get away on the Sunwolves. Depending on which way you think the Sunwolves are trending. I think they're a different beast away from home. They played okay against the Reds, and we're in that match as well, but it was the Reds. Yeah. So Jordan he's gotten to double figures 4 times out of 11 games, which is, that's not ideal. Whereas Esterhuizen, far more consistent. He hasn't put up the 40 points, but he's got into the 20s 3 times, put up double figures 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times. Yeah. So, and then, well, I guess if you're looking at it purely on that, I guess he's not a lot more consistent, but, yeah.
It's funny looking at his stat line, right? It's 1 week on, 1 week off, 1 week on, 1 week off for the last kind of 7 weeks.
Yeah, it's almost literally like that. There's one sort of anomaly in between 3 and 4 where there was a minus and a 3. But other than that, yeah, you're absolutely right. He's been going from 20 points thereabouts to 2 or 3 and then reverting the next week. So, so he'll definitely score quite low next week. I can guarantee you that.
I like it.
So the pattern.
Well, what about players that you want to trade for then? So would you have Moala or one of these guys? Esterhuizen, let's say.
Yeah. That's a really good question. I guess you'd have to go with the guy that's scored the points and has the matchups. And he's got both, really. So,
Indeed. I said at the top of the podcast that, South African teams are going to feature lightly. We haven't got to the Bulls Stormers yet, but yeah, you start looking at these folks. And if you want to look at someone else as well, go a little bit wider. Mvovo and JP. Now, I'll put my hand up as being, I've got a bit of a blind spot for JP. I just think he's a very kind of limited winger, but he keeps on scoring the points.
True. And
they did it again this week, and looking at those matchups, there's going to be breaks. All of those players that I said previously, Nabuli, Ifsatir, Helit Pedi, Value, Nanai, Tusilet, I'd want Mvovo and JP over those guys.
Yeah, definitely. I've got Mvovo stashed, purely almost for the playoffs. I wouldn't really have any intention of playing him in any reasonably tough matchup, but, I'll be quite happy to roll him out against the Kings, etc. Or sorry, not the Kings, but
Yeah, Sunwolves, the Moon Puppies.
Yep.
What about players like Yamada and Lee again? These are two that I was thinking of.
Yeah, I think I'm pretty much done with Lee. I could easily take anybody from one of the teams you've mentioned.
Now that's more to do with Blues, isn't it? Because and their run in, because he actually hasn't been. He scored a try here this week, and he hasn't been too bad.
Yeah. No, I don't mean that in the sense that I'm done with him because I'm disappointed in what he's done. It's just that I just think I could do better with, perhaps a lower light, but just with better fixtures.
So I just typed Jet Li into the player search and didn't come up with one.
I can't believe that. What I opted doing.
Indeed. All right, anything more from this match? This was worrying for the Kings.
Yeah, it was. But
I think
also...
Mallet said they were a Division C team. Did you see that quote?
Yeah, I did see that. Yeah. No, if you like it, did we have to tell you to play people against the Kings?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. You want to get the guy that benched Lambie in this game because he...
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, Bulls Stormers. This was the match that everybody thought that it was going to be. Very tight, very, very tight. Kobus and John Ben stay on the no-fly list. But I wanted to talk about looking into your crystal ball again. Ishmael and Yelingo, they didn't score well in this match. A bit more of a symptom of the matchup they were playing. But the Bulls play the Sunwolves, the Hawaris, and the Cheetahs in the final. Now, there is a risk to them because Basson is somewhere in that mix, and because SP Murray and potentially Warwick Hillant coming back as well at some point, which I think he'll probably be back the next one. Out of Ishmael and Yelingo, who would you prefer?
My perception is that Ishmael is more likely to play.
Yeah, I think so too.
And it's not necessarily based on how I think they'll score. It's just a feeling I get that Yelingo's a little bit more of a just on the sideline. He's probably more only a mistake or two away from getting swapped out of the team, I guess.
Yeah, I think so. It's a shame because I would have Hillant, Ishmael and Yelingo for me, but they obviously want Basong in that team. So working forward on that, looking at playing the Sunwolves, Hawaris and Cheetahs, that's pretty tasty. So we listed all of those outside backs. Are you as confident that Ishmael, let's say it's Ishmael, over those guys, or would you start thinking maybe that's a little bit too far?
That might be a little bit too far.
The Bulls don't quite have the firepower of the Sharks. Is that kind of what we're inferring?
A little bit, yeah. I'm probably. Who did they ran up a score early in the season, didn't they? And that was against the Rebels. But I think that was more about the way the Rebels turned up in that game. And
Warwick Hillant back in this team.
Yeah. I mean, that would make a big difference. I do think they're obviously, as we've discussed before, a little bit limited by the fly half position and the ability to actually sort of distribute to the outsides.
I'll go one step further. Actually, I think it's the fly half and the half back.
Oh yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Just not getting it to those guys. Poor old Jesse Creel's just earning a living out there playing cards.
Yeah. So for instance, I can't imagine them putting up 60 points on the Cheetahs. Is that in a home or away game for the Bulls?
Away.
Okay. So that, in my mind, when I think of that fixture, I could definitely see them running out winners, and it might be reasonably comfortable. It could be a 30 odd to something, 30 odd to maybe 20, but that fifth,
not as if it was at Loftus.
No, I think that would make a difference, and not as if, say, they were playing the Kings, for instance, or I think there's a little bit more fight in a local derby game, and a little bit more fight in the Cheetahs.
Yep, I think for me that second leg of the semi-final, Bulls Sunwolves at Loftus, as much as that Sharks match, if Warwick Hillant's back, I'd want every bit of Ishmael or a lot of players in that team. And just a bit of an extension to that, so a lot of folks are going to be, if they are right on the bread line, trying to make those playoffs, trying to get that last wildcard spot, try and prey on the Warwick Hillant owner and offer him a trade, but their trade expires on Wednesday night, so that they don't have team news, so that they can't say, I'm going to play Warwick Hillant. Because I think he will play, but you want to be able to prey on every little bit of doubt a FRD manager is, and you may be able to get him for a little bit less than what you ordinarily would have once the team is named. Damien Delende, better in this match. Had Stransky at one point he was almost hear him thumping the table because he had blinkers on when Delende should have passed it, and he said that's the sixth time that he's just tucked the ball under his arm. And I was like, yeah, I'm not so worried about that as an FRD owner.
No, absolutely. Yeah, you're probably more happy than anything else.
Yeah, exactly. Peter Steph-Totoy again was just a beast. Just everywhere in that game. Good to see Etzebeth back, played well, but yeah, Peter Steph-Totoy, aside from probably Delende, is the player of this match. Was there anyone else that we wanted to talk about in this match?
Not specifically, but just moving on to a general sort of point about. So I think when we talked about, obviously we're focused heavily on the run-in for the South African teams, and we talked about teams from the other conferences. I think we thought that, as a general rule, that the Highlanders had the best run from a New Zealand point of view, and the Brumbies had the best run. And Brumbies Sunwolves is this week in Canberra. I think if you're trying to get to the playoffs and you need players for obviously to do that, Brumbies are a good team to focus on because they can get you there this week and then obviously move forward and have some reasonable fixtures as well.
No, it's a good shout. So let's jump across to the free agent desk. Now, obviously, as I said at the top, not really, a bit of a mixture of a few. It's who you should trade for versus who you should pick up as well. So I'm going to run through the list here. Now, a lot of these guys we've talked about already in view of the playoff schedule and what's coming up in the next few weeks. But Jordan, Esterhausen, Ismail, Yalengo. We talked about Karevi, maybe just trying your luck. See if folks are very, very desperate. Frisbee, Mvovo, JP Peterson. Players like Keegan Daniel is another one as well. He's still out there in a lot of leagues. Manisi, I'd roll the dice on him as well. See if you can trade for Combrick and Marpo. Yaku Creel's someone we didn't talk about. Yaku and Warren Whiteley, both of them actually. And Skosan. That's probably more of a mixture of looking forward, to be honest, more than players that are available on your waiver wire. But have you got anyone for this week, mate?
Well, we haven't really talked about him before, but Willis Salaholo, I think, will... No, I'm joking. No, I think that's a fair assessment. Other people that possibly on the waiver wire, Nigel R. Wong, and maybe you liked a bit of James Dargaville, and I can kind of understand that.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, against the Sunwolves, that's not a bad show. You saw what Karevi just did to them.
Yeah.
Let's look into the top score for this game week, the top managers and top leagues. And we have a new entry in the Fantasy Rugby Draft Hall of Fame. Congratulations, Johan Skelsana. The highest individual game week score ever. So 275.4. Team Painkillers in the league, Regan 1973. So well done, Johan. That's an exceptional score. The best ever. I think you can put Mr. Daniel, Lambie, Jordan and Combrink on your Christmas card list. The top leagues through 13 game weeks. Number 5 is the Turtles 2016 comp. Number 4 is Dave's Dickheads. Number 3 is Chip and Chase. Number 2 is the Highveld Bowl. So that means number 1 is the B&B League. Well done, chaps. Keeping up strong. Those names are jostling for position in the top 5 spots every game week. Really impressive. And the top managers after 13 game weeks are number 5, Ian Strusner. Number 4, Justin Vermeulen. Number 3, Franco Duplessis. Number 2, Sam Kanoski. And number 1, Luke Crombie. So congratulations, Luke, knocking off Sam up top for the first time in a while. Congratulations. Keep it up, Luke. All right, a little bit of admin. You can follow us on Twitter at Fantasy Rugby Draft, at Fantasy RUG Draft, or follow us on Facebook, Fantasy Rugby Draft. And we are getting a lot of emails through, actually on Facebook as well. There's a messenger component to that, which is a nice way to get some trade questions posed and asked and answered. Or you can drop us an email on support at fantasyrugbydraft.com. Mossman's on at Nathan Mossman. That's probably about the time we have for today. Thanks for downloading and listening. Please leave a review if you can. And we really appreciate you taking the time. Just introduce a friend to the podcast as well, or post it on your message board. If this has been helpful at all, or if you get anything out of it, then please just take a little bit of time and jump on iTunes. It means a lot to us, and it'd be able to keep the lights on down the line. Thanks for downloading and listening. I'm Bruce Wilkinson. He's Nathan Mossman.
Oh, I forgot to mention Gary Gold.
LT Repeater.
What a pass here by Christian Cullen. Plenty of support, and what a dummy!